It was the first day back to school after a long summer break. The excitement of seeing friends and the nervousness of new classes filled the air. But something felt off as I stepped off the bus and onto the school grounds. The building looked the same, but the windows were darker, almost as if they were hiding something. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. As I walked through the hallways, I noticed that the usual chatter and laughter were missing. The faces of my classmates were pale, their eyes wide with fear. Even the teachers seemed on edge. "What's going on?" I asked my friend Sarah. "You didn't hear?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "There's something in the school, something evil." I laughed, thinking it was a joke, but her face remained serious. "It's true," she insisted. "People have heard strange noises, seen shadows moving in the dark, and some have even gone missing." I didn't want to believe her, but the fear in her eyes was real. The day went on, and the feeling of dread grew stronger. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, lurking in the shadows. During lunch, the lights flickered and a cold chill ran down my spine. The room went silent, and everyone's eyes turned to the dark corner of the cafeteria. That's when I saw it. A shadowy figure, tall and menacing with glowing red eyes. It moved towards us and the air grew cold. People screamed and ran, but I was frozen in place, unable to move. The figure reached out, its long, bony fingers stretching towards me. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, and everything went black. I woke up in the hospital, surrounded by my family and friends. They told me I had collapsed and that there was nothing in the school. But I knew what I saw. I knew it was real. The school was closed for investigation, and they found nothing out of the ordinary. But those who were there that day know the truth. We never spoke of it again, but the memories haunt me to this day. The fear, the darkness, the evil that lurked in the shadows. I never went back to that school. I couldn't, because I knew that whatever was there was still waiting, watching, ready to strike again.
It was the first day back after the summer break, and everyone was buzzing with excitement. New clothes, new notebooks, and the same old sense of camaraderie. I was catching up with friends I hadn't seen in months, swapping stories about our summers. But as the day went on, something started to feel off. It's like that nostalgic atmosphere was warping into something eerie. Now don't get me wrong, I've heard my fair share of ghost stories and urban legends, but they were just that, stories. This was different. This felt real. As the day dragged on, the halls grew quieter, and the shadows seemed to grow longer. You know that feeling you get when you're being watched? Multiply that by 10, and you'll understand what I mean. Lunchtime came around, and I headed to the cafeteria with my friends. We grabbed our trays and took a seat, but something was wrong. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but the air felt heavy, like a storm was brewing. That's when I noticed it, the whispers. At first I thought it was just the usual high school gossip, but the words were garbled, disjointed, and they seemed to be coming from all around us. I looked at my friends, hoping they were hearing it too, but their faces were pale and their eyes wide. They were hearing it, all right. The whispers grew louder, almost like a chorus of distant voices, all overlapping in a chaotic symphony. I couldn't make out the words, but the fear in my friends' eyes told me everything I needed to know. Something wasn't right. We fled the cafeteria, hoping to escape the unsettling whispers, but they followed us. It was like they were crawling under our skin, burrowing into our minds. Our footsteps echoed through the hallways as we ran, but there was another sound, a faint, haunting laughter. It was as if the very walls were mocking us, relishing in our fear. We found refuge in the library, barricading ourselves in, and hoping that whatever was out there couldn't get in. But as we caught our breath and scanned the room, we realized we weren't alone. The shadows, those deep, sinister shadows, were creeping in through the windows, swirling and dancing as if they had a life of their own. We huddled together, trying to make sense of what was happening. Our phones were useless, no signal, no way to call for help. We were trapped, surrounded by those chilling whispers and those relentless shadows. Time stretched on, and the daylight began to fade, replaced by an otherworldly gloom that seemed to seep from the walls themselves. As night fell, the shadows grew thicker, more aggressive. The laughter turned into agonized cries, echoing through the halls. We clung to each other, our fear palpable, our hearts racing. It felt like an eternity trapped in that library. The very essence of the school warped into something beyond comprehension. Hours passed, and just as we were about to lose all hope, the first rays of dawn broke through the windows. With the light, the shadows retreated, the whispers faded, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. We stumbled out of that library, our minds a whirlwind of confusion and terror. We were never able to explain what had happened that day. Was it some sort of collective hallucination? A manifestation of our shared anxieties about returning to school? Or was there something more sinister at play? All I know is that the memory of that day still haunts me, a reminder that sometimes the familiar can turn into the unknown in the blink of an eye. So my friends, next time you're walking down the halls of your high school, remember this story. And if you ever hear those whispers or catch a glimpse of those shadows, don't brush it off as your imagination. Because you never know when the nostalgia of the past might take a dark and chilling turn, and your reality could become a nightmare straight out of the twisted tales we tell in the dead of night.
The summer had been long and hot, and I was eager to get back to school, see my friends, and start fresh. But as I approached the school building on that first day, something felt off. The school looked the same, but the air was heavy, and the usual excitement of the first day was replaced by an unsettling silence. I brushed it off as first day jitters and made my way to my locker. As I turned the combination lock, I noticed a strange note stuck to the door of the locker next to mine. It was written in a hurried scrawl, "Don't trust the new teacher." I laughed it off as a prank, but the words lingered in my mind as I headed to my first class. The new teacher, Mr. Thompson, was an odd character. He was tall and thin, with piercing eyes that seemed to follow you wherever you went. His voice was soft but carried a strange tone that sent shivers down my spine. The first few weeks went by without incident, but the feeling of unease never left me. My friends noticed it too, and we began to share stories of strange occurrences. One friend swore she saw Mr. Thompson talking to himself in the darkened classroom late at night. Another claimed to have found old newspaper clippings in his desk about a series of unsolved disappearances in a nearby town. The rumors spread, and the fear grew. But it was all just stories, right? Then, one day, a student went missing. The school went into lockdown and the police were called. They searched the building, but there was no sign of the missing student. Days turned into weeks, and the fear turned into terror. More students began to disappear, one by one, always after having a class with Mr. Thompson. The school became a place of horror. Parents pulled their children out, and the once bustling hallways were now empty and silent. I couldn't shake the feeling that Mr. Thompson was behind it all. I began to investigate, digging into his past, looking for any clues. What I found was chilling. Mr. Thompson had worked at several schools over the years, and at each one, students had gone missing. He had changed his name, moved from town to town, but the pattern was always the same. I knew I had to do something, but who would believe me? I gathered evidence, took photos, and prepared to go to the police. But the night before I planned to turn everything in, I received a note in my locker. It was the same hurried scrawl. "I know what you're doing, you're next." I never went back to that school. I moved away, changed my name, and tried to forget. But I know he's still out there, still teaching, still preying on unsuspecting students. And I know that the horror of that school year will haunt me forever.
New teachers, and the promise of reconnecting with old friends. I was ready to put the summer behind me and embrace the challenges of junior year. The first day back was filled with the usual hustle and bustle. Friends sharing summer stories, teachers outlining their expectations, and the smell of cafeteria food filling the hallways. But amidst the normalcy, something was off. Our school had a new principal, Mr. Harris. He was a stern man with cold eyes and a rigid demeanor. He introduced himself during the morning assembly, speaking of discipline, excellence, and the importance of following rules. As the days turned into weeks, the school began to change. Strict rules were implemented, surveillance cameras were installed, and a sense of fear began to permeate the classrooms. Students who broke even the smallest rules were taken to Mr. Harris's office, only to return pale and shaken, refusing to speak about what had happened. The terror grew as more students were summoned, each one returning more frightened than the last. I tried to ignore it, focusing on my studies and friends, but the fear was always there, lurking in the back of my mind. Then one day, it was my turn. I was late to class, caught up in a conversation with a friend. As I hurried down the hallway, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned to find Mr. Harris, his eyes cold and unfeeling. "You're late," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Come with me." I followed him to his office, my heart pounding in my chest. The office was dark and filled with strange artifacts, old books, and a peculiar smell that made me nauseous. Mr. Harris sat behind his desk, his eyes fixed on me. He began to speak of rules, obedience, and the importance of discipline. But his words were twisted, filled with dark undertones and hidden threats. I felt a chill run down my spine as he continued to speak, his voice growing more sinister with each word. Then he stopped and looked at me, his eyes filled with a darkness I had never seen before. "You will obey," he said, his voice dripping with malice, "or you will suffer the consequences." I left his office shaken and terrified, unable to shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The school year continued, the terror growing with each passing day. Students were disappearing, teachers were resigning, and the school was becoming a place of fear and oppression. I knew I had to do something. But what? I began to investigate, digging into Mr. Harris's past, looking for answers. What I found was a series of schools, each one falling into chaos and fear under his leadership. Students disappearing, teachers leaving, and a trail of terror that led back to him. I knew I had to stop him. But how? I gathered evidence, spoke to former students, and prepared to expose him. But he was always one step ahead, watching, waiting, ready to strike. The school year ended, but the terror remained. A dark cloud hanging over the school, a reminder of the horror that had unfolded. I knew that I had to keep fighting, to stop him from spreading his terror to other schools, other students. But I also knew that he was still out there, watching, waiting, ready to strike again. And I knew that the terror of that school year would stay with me forever, a haunting reminder of the darkness that can lurk in the most unexpected places.
Was tinged with a sense of mystery. Our school had just completed renovations, and rumors were swirling about hidden rooms and secret passages. As students settled into their routines, strange things began to happen. Books would fly off shelves, doors would slam shut, and eerie whispers could be heard in the hallways. The school was abuzz with talk of ghosts and hauntings. A group of us, intrigued by the mysteries, decided to investigate. We would stay late after school, exploring the hidden corners and trying to uncover the truth. As the weeks went by, the occurrences grew more frequent and more terrifying. Objects would move on their own, shadows would dance on the walls, and chilling screams would echo through the empty corridors. We were determined to find the source of the terror, and our investigation led us to a hidden room in the basement. Inside, we found old photographs, strange symbols, and a journal filled with dark incantations. The journal belonged to a student from decades ago, who had dabbled in dark magic and had unleashed something terrible. We knew we had to stop it, but how? We researched, studied, and prepared to face the unknown. But the terror continued to grow, reaching a fever pitch as the school became a place of fear and dread. Then, one night, as we were gathered in the hidden room, the truth was revealed. One of our group, Emily, began to act strangely. Her eyes glazed over, her voice changed, and she began to chant in a language we didn't understand. We realized, with horror, that Emily was behind it all. She had found the journal before us, had become obsessed with the dark magic, and had been the one causing the terror. We confronted her, fought against her dark powers, and managed to stop her, but not before she revealed her true intentions. She had wanted to make the school a place of fear, to control it through terror, and to become a legend in her own right. We were shocked, betrayed, and heartbroken. The school year continued, the terror stopped, and Emily was sent away. But the scars remained, a haunting reminder of the darkness that had lurked among us. The twist, the revelation that one of our own was behind the terror, changed everything. It turned a tale of mystery and horror into a story of betrayal and tragedy. And it reminded us that sometimes, the most terrifying monsters are not the ones hiding in the shadows, but the ones standing right beside us.